Single dad CEO hires a clown for his daughter's party, but the woman who shows up turns out. Imagine this: a sprawling estate, shimmering with gold and white banners fluttering in the breeze. Balloons float gracefully above an entrance, gate that seems more like the gateway to another world than just a home. Inside, servers glide through rooms filled with tailored suits and designer gowns, their trays of hors d'oeuvres glinting under crystal chandeliers. This isn't just any gathering, it's a birthday party. But not for just anyone. It's for Emily Archer, the 6-year-old daughter of Ryan Archer, a single dad who happens to be one of the most powerful CEOs in the city. Everything about this day screams perfection, everything except for one thing: Emily herself. She sits quietly on the edge of a velvet lounge, clutching a worn-out stuffed rabbit, her face blank, her eyes distant. No amount of cake, no shiny tiara, no flashing cameras can coax even a hint of a smile from her small frame. And as the guests laugh and sip champagne around her, she remains invisible, lost in a silence that speaks louder than words. Ryan notices. Of course. How could he not? He's tried everything to bring back the light in his daughter's eyes since losing her mother a year ago. But grief doesn't follow schedules or scripts, and neither does Emily. Vanessa, Ryan's fiancée, has her own ideas about what Emily needs. She needs to learn how to perform. Vanessa whispers sharply to Ryan at one point, her voice dripping with both silk and steel. To her, smiling is a skill, something Emily must master if she's going to grow up in their polished, high-stakes world. But Ryan knows better. Or at least, he thinks he does. For now, all he can do is stand by helplessly, watching his little girl retreat further into herself, while the party swirls around them like a glittering storm they can't escape. Then, there's a knock at the gate. A woman stumbles in, dragging a suitcase full of colorful props behind her. Her rainbow wig is slightly askew. Her boots are 2 sizes too big. And she's late, very late. This is Callie Bloom, the clown hired to save the day. At first glance, she couldn't be more out of place in this world of wealth and precision. The security guard looks skeptical. Vanessa outright dismissive. Yet when Callie kneels beside Emily, pulling out a sock puppet named Benny, something shifts. Slowly, tentatively, Emily begins to laugh. Not the polite chuckle expected of her, but real, uncontainable laughter that echoes off the marble walls and stops every adult in the room mid-conversation. For the first time in months, Ryan sees his daughter truly happy, but happiness, it turns out, comes with complications. As the afternoon unfolds, Callie proves herself to be far more than just a clown. She's observant, kind, and fiercely protective of Emily in ways that surprise everyone, including herself. When she overhears Vanessa threatening the little girl later that evening, Callie doesn't hesitate. She steps forward, speaking up, despite knowing full well the consequences of challenging someone like Vanessa Quinn. What follows is a confrontation that leaves the room buzzing with tension. Vanessa accuses Callie of lying, of being jealous, of trying to ruin their engagement. Ryan, caught between anger and confusion, sides with Vanessa, at least outwardly. Security escorts Callie out, leaving Emily crying silently in the corner as the heavy oak doors slam shut behind her. The weight of what just happened settles over the house, but the story doesn't end here, not even close. Back inside, the party resumes as though nothing happened. Vanessa smooths over the disruption with practiced charm, directing attention back to the cake-cutting ceremony and photo ops. Meanwhile, Ryan finds himself unable to shake the memory of Callie's voice. I know what fear looks like. she had said, her words cutting deeper than he cared to admit. That night, as he checks on Emily before bed, he notices something subtle, yet undeniable. A flinch, barely perceptible, as he leans down to kiss her forehead. It's a moment that replays in his mind long after the lights go out, gnawing at him, forcing him to question everything he thought he knew about his fiancée, his daughter, and himself. Days turn into weeks, and life at the Archer estate continues. Its carefully orchestrated rhythm. Vanessa remains poised and polished, the picture of perfection. Emily, however, grows quieter still, retreating further into her shell. Ryan starts paying closer attention, noticing things he hadn't before. The way Vanessa snaps at the staff, the sharpness in her tone when Emily interrupts, the way Emily hesitates before answering questions or reaching for her hand. Doubt creeps in, slow and insidious, until finally Ryan makes a decision. He hires someone discreet to keep an eye on Vanessa, someone who will report back only to him. It's a move born of desperation, of love, and perhaps a touch of guilt. For ignoring the signs, for sending Callie away without listening, for failing his daughter when she needed him most. But fate has a way of intervening when we least expect it. One sunny afternoon at the park, Ryan takes Emily out alone, for the first time in months. They're sitting quietly on a picnic blanket when a familiar voice drifts across the grass. Who wants a balloon that looks like a dinosaur, but maybe turns out like a spaghetti monster instead? Emily's head snaps up. Across the field stands Callie, no longer in full clown attire, but unmistakably herself, surrounded by giggling children. Without hesitation, Emily runs to her, throwing her arms around Callie's waist. The look of shock, and then recognition on Callie's face, says it all. In that moment, boundaries blur, roles shift, and the fragile thread holding Ryan's life together begins to unravel completely. What happens next will change everything. For Ryan, for Emily, and for Callie. Will Ryan confront the truth about Vanessa once and for all? Can Callie find her way back into their lives without reopening old wounds? And most importantly, will Emily finally get the chance to heal and thrive in a world that feels safe again? These questions hang in the air, unanswered, as the scene fades to black. Stay tuned for the next chapter of this emotional journey, one where courage meets vulnerability, where love defies expectations, and where sometimes the person who shows up late wearing a rainbow wig turns out to be exactly who you need. The next morning, Ryan woke up with a heaviness in his chest. He had spent years building a life that looked perfect from the outside. A towering estate, a high-powered career, and now Vanessa, who seemed like the ideal partner on paper. But perfection, he was beginning to realize, wasn't what Emily's needed. It wasn't what he needed either. As he sat at the breakfast table, watching Vanessa snap at the staff over spilled orange juice, something inside him shifted. The cracks in their relationship weren't just visible, they were widening, and Emily, she barely touched her food, her small hands wrapped tightly around her bunny, as if it were the only thing keeping her grounded. Later that day, Ryan called Greg into his office. "I need someone discreet," he said, his voice low but firm. "Someone to keep an eye on things when I'm not here, especially around Emily." Greg didn't ask questions. He simply nodded and left. Ryan hated himself for it, for having to investigate Vanessa, for ignoring so many signs because he wanted everything to look okay. But deep down, he knew why he was doing this. He couldn't unsee the way Emily flinched when Vanessa raised her voice, or the way she clung to Callie's hand the night she was thrown out. Something wasn't right, and he needed answers. Meanwhile, Callie tried to move on. She returned to her tiny apartment, where the fluorescent kitchen light flickered and the kettle whistled on the stove. Her younger brother Sam looked up from his homework as she walked in. "How was the party?" he asked casually. Callie dropped her bag and sank onto a chair, wiping away the remnants of her clown makeup with a towel. "I made a little girl laugh," she said softly, her voice breaking slightly, "and I made a lot of adults uncomfortable." Sam smirked, used to his sister's knack for stirring trouble. "Sounds like you." But Callie didn't laugh. Instead, she leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. "I got thrown out for telling the truth," she admitted. When Sam asked if she regretted it, she paused, thinking of Emily's wide eyes and the way she'd pressed her hand to the window after Callie left. "No," she finally said. "I'd do it again." Days turned into weeks, and while Callie tried to focus on work and helping Sam with his medical bills, Emily never left her mind. One weekend, Ryan decided to take Emily to the park. It was meant to be a quiet outing, just father and daughter, but fate had other plans. As they sat on a picnic blanket, a familiar sing-song voice drifted across the grass. "Who wants a balloon that looks like a dinosaur, but maybe turns out like a spaghetti monster instead?" Ryan froze. There, surrounded by giggling children, was Callie. Before he could react, Emily bolted toward her, throwing her arms around Callie's waist. For a moment, time stood still. Callie knelt down, her expression softening as she looked at Emily. "I missed you too, sunshine," she whispered. Ryan approached slowly, unsure of what to say. Callie stood up, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I'm not here to ask for anything," she said firmly. "But I need to know she's safe, that someone is really seeing her. Not the grades, not the smile on demand, but her." Ryan swallowed hard. He wanted to apologize, to explain, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he offered her a hesitant invitation. "If you ever want to spend more time with Emily officially, I'd be honored." Callie hesitated, glancing at Emily, whose hopeful eyes said everything. Slowly she nodded, not for Ryan, but for the little girl who once pressed her hand against a window, like a silent promise. When Callie stepped back into the Archer estate, it felt different this time. No one stopped her as she walked through the front door, though every brick and window reminded her of the day she'd been humiliated. Ryan greeted her personally, his voice sincere. "Thank you for coming," he said. From then on, Callie became a regular presence in Emily's life. She brought crayons, glitter, and shoeboxes, turning ordinary afternoons into magical adventures. Together, they built cardboard castles and invisible kingdoms where kindness ruled and laughter echoed freely. The house began to feel lighter, warmer. Even the staff noticed the change. The way Emily skipped instead of shuffled, how she hugged, her bunny with one hand and Callie's waist with the other. But not everyone was happy about the transformation. Vanessa grew colder, sharper. Her smiles became forced, her touch more controlling. Ryan noticed the subtle corrections, the narrowed glances she gave Callie when no one was looking. One evening, tension boiled over. Ryan came home early from a postponed board meeting, expecting quiet. Instead, he heard shouting. Moving cautiously toward the living room, he found Vanessa yelling at Callie. "You think you can replace me? Walking around this house like you belong. You're nothing." Callie's voice trembled, but remained steady. "I'm not trying to replace anyone. I'm just trying to keep Emily safe." Before Ryan could intervene, there was a scream, Emily's. Bursting into the room, he saw Vanessa yanking Emily's hair, pulling the child backward. Callie reached out to shield her, but Ryan stepped in, his voice cutting like a blade. "Let her go! Vanessa froze, her grip loosening. Emily whimpered, trembling as she turned to her father. Ryan held her, close, his heart breaking as he realized how much fear had been hiding beneath the surface. Turning to Vanessa, he spoke with a calm finality. You played the part well, the perfect partner, the polished smile. But I see you now, all of you. Vanessa's face twisted in anger, but before she could respond, officers arrived at the front hall. Evidence of embezzlement and forged invoices tied to the Archer Foundation had surfaced, thanks to Ryan's discreet investigation. As Vanessa stormed out, escorted by the police, Ryan knelt beside Emily, holding her tightly. I'm here, he whispered. Emily turned to Callie, her voice small but brave. I'm not scared anymore. Tears filled Callie's eyes, but she smiled, a real, unguarded smile, and stayed. That night, the three of them shared a quiet dinner. There were no spotlights, no grand performances, just soft candlelight and simple dishes, prepared with love. Emily giggled as she reached for a roll, her laughter filling the room like music. Watching them, Ryan felt something stir inside him, something warm, gentle, and undeniable. Reaching into his jacket pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box. Callie's eyes widened, her breath catching as he opened it to reveal a simple silver band. You were never just the clown we hired, he said, his voice trembling. You're the woman my heart chose. Emily tugged gently on Ryan's sleeve, whispering, I choose her too. Forever. Callie's tears spilled over, but her smile shone brighter than ever. In that moment, there were no spotlights, no applause, just one small family bound by courage, love, and the belief that sometimes all it takes is one brave person to change everything. That night, after the quiet dinner and the heartfelt exchange, Ryan found himself sitting alone in his study. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the wind outside. He stared at the small velvet box still resting on his desk, the silver band gleaming softly under the lamplight. Everything felt different now, lighter somehow, yet heavier too. He thought about Emily's words. I choose her too, forever. A 6-year-old's voice had carried more weight than any boardroom decision he'd ever made. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was pretending to hold it all together. Maybe because, for once, he wasn't holding it alone. Callie stood at the kitchen sink later that evening, washing dishes by hand, even though the house had a state-of-the-art dishwasher. It wasn't about efficiency for her. It was about rhythm, about finding calm in the small tasks. The warm water ran over her hands as she scrubbed, her mind replaying the events of the day. She hadn't expected this life, not for a moment. When she first walked into the Archer estate months ago, late and flustered, she never imagined staying long enough to see how deeply its walls could change, or how deeply they could change her. But here she was, folding towels, humming an off-key lullaby, and feeling something she hadn't let herself feel in years. Hope. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Greg, Ryan's private assistant, knocked lightly on the door before stepping inside with an envelope in his hand. Mr. Archer asked me to give this to you, he said, handing it to Callie. Inside was a letter written in Ryan's neat handwritings and a set of keys. The letter read, You've given us so much already, but I want to ask one more thing. Stay. Not as someone who helps, but as someone who belongs. These are your keys now. This is your home. Callie's breath caught as she looked up at Greg, who simply smiled and nodded before leaving. Her fingers traced the edge of the keys, the metal cool against her skin. Home. The word echoed in her chest, unfamiliar, yet undeniable. Later that afternoon, Ryan took Emily and Callie to the park again. The same park where Emily had run to Callie weeks earlier. They spread out a blanket under the shade of a sprawling oak tree, the kind of place that felt timeless. As Emily chased butterflies, with wild giggles, Ryan turned to Callie. "Do you remember what you told me?" he asked softly. She tilted her head, confused. "About love," he clarified. "You said it looks like people who stay." Callie nodded slowly, unsure where he was going with this. "Well," Ryan continued, reaching for her hand, "I think it also looks like people who choose each other, even when it's hard." His gaze held hers, steady and sure. "And I choose you, Callie Bloom. Every messy, brave, beautiful part of you." Emily bounded back to them then, her cheeks flushed from running. Seeing their intertwined hands, she grinned and flopped down between them. "Does this mean we're a team now?" she asked, looking from one to the other. Ryan chuckled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We've always been a team, sweetheart. Now we just have a name for it." Callie leaned forward, wrapping her arms around both of them. "Team Archer," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Emily squealed in delight, hugging them tighter. In that moment, surrounded by laughter and sunlight, it felt like nothing could touch them. But life has a way of testing even the strongest bonds. Weeks later, Vanessa returned, not physically, but through the media storm she unleashed. Tabloids splashed headlines across every newsstand. CEO dumps fiancé for clown. Photos of Callie in her clown costume circulated alongside scathing articles questioning Ryan's judgment. Reporters camped outside the estate gates, shouting questions at anyone who dared leave. For a while, it seemed like the world might tear them apart after all. Yet, instead of crumbling, the family grew closer. Callie faced the cameras head-on during a press conference, her voice steady and clear. "I didn't come into this life looking for fame or fortune," she said. "I came to make a little girl laugh, and maybe help her dad find his smile again. If that makes me a clown, then I wear the title proudly." Her words resonated far beyond the courtroom, where Vanessa's trial unfolded. People began sharing their own stories of resilience, kindness, and unlikely heroes. Social media flooded with messages of support, using hashtags like Clown with Courage and Love Without Labels. What started as ridicule transformed into admiration, proving that sometimes the smallest acts of bravery can spark the biggest changes. As the dust settled, Ryan, Callie, and Emily settled into a new normal, one built on authenticity rather than appearances. They hosted smaller gatherings at the estate, inviting neighbors and friends instead of high-profile elites. The grand hall, once filled with stiff formalities, became a space for creativity and connection. Emily's drawings covered the walls, and Callie's glittery crafts found permanent homes on shelves throughout the house. Even Sam, Callie's younger brother, joined them often, bringing his sharp wit and endless curiosity. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, the three of them sat together on the porch swing. Emily nestled between Ryan and Callie, her bunny clutched tightly in one hand and a fresh drawing in the other. "What are you working on now?" Callie asked, peeking over her shoulder. Emily beamed. "It's us," she said, pointing to the figures on the page. "See, we're holding hands, and there's a big heart above us. That's our forever family." Ryan kissed the top of her head, his eyes glistening. "Our forever family," he echoed, pulling them both closer. In the end, it wasn't wealth or status that defined them. It was love. Love that showed up uninvited, wearing mismatched boots and a rainbow wig. Love that stayed when it would have been easier to leave. Love that chose courage over fear, truth over performance. and connection over perfection. And as the stars twinkled above, casting their gentle glow over the Archer estate, it was clear that some families aren't bound by blood, they're bound by choice. By standing up for what's right, even when no one else believes. By being brave enough to laugh, to cry, and to start over. Because sometimes, the person who shows up late turns out to be exactly who you need.